Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're taking a look at NLP,
Yeah.
natural language processing, that fascinating field where we try to get computers to, well, understand us.
It's definitely a hot topic these days.
It is, and you're not alone if you're curious about it. We had a listener write in with some great questions. They're wondering if NLP is the future of programming, you know, and if there are any, shortcuts to learning this stuff.
Big questions, and important ones, too.
Exactly. So we're going to tackle those head on today. We'll be using Muammar Lone's decoding language as our main guide.
A great choice. Really lays out the fundamentals.
Totally. Plus, we're going to sprinkle in insights from this awesome 18-video YouTube deep dive course on NLP. It's like having a second expert in the room.
Layers of insight. I like it.
Right. Okay, so Lone kicks things off by taking us way back. Think 1950s when NLP was just a baby. Imagine trying to translate Russian into English using punch cards. Can you believe that?
That was the Georgetown IBM experiment, right?
Uh-huh.
1954.
Yeah. Wild, huh?
It really shows how far we've come. I mean, they managed to translate, 60 sentences?
It was limited, for sure, but it was a spark. That's what Lone says. It kind of got people thinking about the possibilities.
It's amazing what those early pioneers could do with such, limited technology.
For real. Fast forward to the 60s, though, and NLP was still pretty basic. Lone talks about this program called Eliza. It was like a chatbot that pretended to be a therapist.
I've heard of that, using pattern matching to simulate conversation, wasn't it?
Exactly. Clever, but not really understanding anything, right?
More like an illusion of understanding, but still a stepping stone.
Totally. Then, boom, the 80s and 90s hit. Lone calls it the statistical revolution. Computers started learning patterns from tons of data, not just relying on those handcrafted rules anymore.
That was a game changer, like hidden Markov models, n-gram models,
Okay.
all those statistical methods.
Exactly. Which paved the way for the deep learning stuff that's, everywhere now. Neural networks just eating up data and finding these crazy complex patterns.
Leading to all those amazing applications we see today.
Which brings us back to our listeners' question about shortcuts. Is there a secret hack to becoming an NLP wizard? Lone's book seems to push a pretty structured approach.
Yeah, no magic bullet, unfortunately. But smart strategies do exist.
Right. So Lone breaks NLP down into these core parts like phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics.
And pragmatics, it's like building a house, Gotta have a solid foundation before you start slapping on the roof.
Love that analogy. And it seems like that 18-video YouTube course kind of mirrors that approach, right? Each video is a building block.
Exactly. It's not just random lectures. It's a guided tour.
Cool. So any advice for someone just starting out? Should they binge all 18 videos at once?
I'd say take it one step at a time, master one concept, practice it, then move on to the next.
So decoding language and the YouTube course are their companions on this NLP journey.
Think of it like that, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's shift gears a bit. Why should people even care about NLP? What can you do with it once you've learned it?
Oh man, where do I even begin? The applications are exploding right now.
Lone gives some pretty cool examples in the book, right? In business, imagine automating all those boring tasks, like reading through contracts or analyzing customer feedback.
Right. NLP can handle that stuff in a flash. No more humans sifting through mountains of text.
It frees people up to focus on more creative, strategic stuff. That's got to be a good thing.
Absolutely. And it goes way beyond business, too. Think healthcare. NLP is being used to analyze medical research, helping us find new drugs faster.
Wow. Really?
Yep. And some researchers are even using it to analyze doctor-patient conversations, which could lead to earlier diagnosis of diseases.
That's amazing. So NLP could actually save lives.
It really has that potential.
Yeah.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We can't even imagine what's coming next.
Which I guess brings us back to the future of programming question.
Yeah.
Our listener wants to know if NLP is the next big thing.
It's definitely a question on a lot of people's minds. I mean, look at voice assistants and chatbots. We're already using natural language to interact with computers more and more.
And that's just the beginning, right?
Totally. Multimodal NLP is another huge area. That's where you combine text with images, audio, all sorts of stuff. We're basically trying to teach computers to understand the world the way we do.
So we could be programming using everyday language one day.
It's a possibility, yeah. It's still early days, but the potential is huge.
Wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so for people who are super intrigued by all this, where should they go to learn more? Aside from Lone's book, of course.
Well, he mentioned some great resources in decoding language. There are these Python libraries like NLTK and Spacey. They're like toolkits for building your own NLP applications.
So NLTK is good for beginners, and Spacey's more for, like, pros.
You got it. Lone also talks about the importance of working with real-world data. There are all these data sets out there specifically for things like sentiment analysis and question answering.
So reading about NLP isn't enough. You got to actually get your hands dirty and play
Yeah.
around with real data.
Exactly. And the best part is these resources are all freely available online. So if you're excited about NLP, just dive in and start exploring.
That's great advice. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about the history of NLP, how to learn it, the crazy possibilities it holds. But there's another side to this story, right? The ethical stuff. Like, what happens when this powerful technology falls into the wrong hands?
That's a crucial point, and it's something Lone definitely doesn't shy away from in his book.
So we need to talk about that.
We do. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're continuing our NLP journey, and we're about to get into some really interesting territory.
On all ears.
So we've been talking about all the amazing progress in NLP, but like Lone points out, in decoding language, there are still some big hurdles to overcome, especially when it comes to, actually understanding human language.
It's funny, right? Like, we humans deal with ambiguity in language all the time. It's just natural for us. But it seems like it's a real stumbling block for computers.
It is. And it's not just one kind of ambiguity either. Lone breaks it down into different types. There's lexical ambiguity, where a single word can have multiple meanings.
Like bank,
Yeah.
right? Could be a financial institution or the edge of a river.
Exactly. Or bat. Are we talking about the animal or the baseball bat? Context is everything for us humans, but how do you teach that to a computer?
That's the million-dollar question, I guess.
It is. NLP researchers are working on it, though. One approach is to use statistical parsing techniques.
Statistical parsing sounds complicated.
It can be. Basically, these are probabilistic models. They try to figure out the most likely interpretation of a sentence based on the surrounding words and the overall context.
So it's like the computer's making an educated guess based on what it knows.
Exactly. And these models have gotten pretty sophisticated, but they still have limitations, especially when it comes to more complex types of ambiguity, like syntactic ambiguity.
Syntactic.
Mm.
Oh, you mean those sentences that can have, like, two different meanings depending on how you read them?
Precisely. Lone gives a great example. I saw a man with a telescope. Did you use the telescope to see the man, or did the man have the telescope?
Okay, yeah, I see how that would trip up a computer. It's like those optical illusions, right? Where your brain sees two different things in the same image.
Perfect analogy. And it gets even trickier with semantic ambiguity. That's where the meaning of a whole sentence can be unclear. Like, every student read 2 books. Did they all read the same 2 books, or did they each read 2 different books?
Right, right. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about all the subtle ways language can be ambiguous. Makes you appreciate how complex human communication really is.
For sure. And on top of all that, human language is incredibly variable.
You mean like how people from different places talk differently?
Yeah. Accents, dialects, slang. Lone talks about all that. Plus, you've got different levels of formality, like how you talk to your boss versus your friends. And then there are just individual quirks in how people use language. All those things can really mess with NLP systems.
So it's not just about teaching a computer to understand language in general. It's about teaching it to understand all the little variations and nuances.
Exactly. And then you've got the whole challenge of non-literal language, sarcasm, idioms, metaphors.
Oh yeah, I can imagine a computer taking kick the bucket literally and getting very confused.
Yeah. Those kinds of expressions rely on shared cultural understanding, which is super hard to program into a machine.
And then there's multimodality, right?
Yeah.
Human communication isn't just about words. It's about facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, all these nonverbal cues that add layers of meaning.
Exactly. And trying to incorporate those cues into NLP systems is a huge area of research. It's essential if we want to create truly human-like AI.
So it sounds like building truly intelligent NLP systems is like, I don't know, solving a giant jigsaw puzzle with pieces that keep changing shape.
I love that. It's a fantastic analogy. But despite all these challenges, Lone is optimistic about the future of NLP. And he has good reason to be.
Why is that?
He sees deep learning as a real game changer. The ability of machines to learn from massive amounts of data has opened up so many new possibilities.
So we're basically giving these NLP systems a crash course in human communication.
Kind of, yeah. But it's not just about brute force data crunching. Lone also emphasizes the importance of structured learning, understanding those building blocks of language phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, pragmatics.
That house analogy again.
Right? Strong foundation, strong structure. And that's where resources like Lone's book and that YouTube deep dive course come in.
Yeah,
They provide a roadmap for building that foundation.
like blueprints for a powerful NLP engine.
Exactly. And as Lone points out, the payoff for mastering NLP can be huge. From revolutionizing business processes to, like we talked about, potentially saving lives in healthcare.
It's pretty mind-blowing stuff. But I imagine there are also potential downsides, right? Ethical considerations we need to think about.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something we're going to dive into in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, folks.
Mm.
We'll be back with part 3, where we explore the ethical implications of NLP and what the future holds for this game-changing technology. Because remember, with great linguistic power comes great responsibility.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been on this awesome journey through the world of NLP.
From those clunky punch cards to like these crazy multimodal systems that can understand images, audio,
Yeah.
the whole shebang.
Right, it's pretty wild. But before we get too carried away with all the cool stuff, we got to talk about the bigger picture, the ethics of it all.
Absolutely. Lone dedicates a good chunk of decoding language to this very topic. Yeah, and for good reason. I mean, when we talk about the ethics of NLP, what are some of the biggies that come to mind?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is making sure these NLP systems are used responsibly, that they don't just perpetuate the biases that already exist out there.
Because they're trained on huge data sets of human language, right?
Exactly. And if that data reflects, let's say, societal biases.
Then the NLP models are just going to amplify those biases.
Exactly. It's like teaching a kid with biased textbooks. They're going to learn a skewed version of the world.
That's a good way to put it. And the consequences could be real, right? Like, imagine an NLP system that's used for hiring decisions, but it's discriminating against certain groups of people.
Or a chatbot that starts spouting off hate speech. Not good.
Definitely not. So being mindful of the data we use to train these systems is super important.
Super important. And it's not just about the data itself, it's about the algorithms too. Bias can sneak in at every step.
So it's not just a tech problem. It's a social and ethical problem too.
You got it. It needs a multifaceted approach. Like, we need better algorithms, more diverse data, and open conversations about the impact of NLP on society.
That's a lot to tackle.
It is. But Lone's hopeful. He talks about the need for collaboration between researchers, developers, policymakers, even the public. We all have a role to play.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into NLP, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away?
I think the biggest thing is that NLP is a powerful tool. Like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It's up to us to make sure it's used responsibly and ethically.
That's a great point to end on. If you're hungry for more on NLP, I highly recommend checking out Muammar Lone's Decoding Language. It's a fantastic resource.
Couldn't agree more. And don't forget that 18-video YouTube deep dive course we mentioned. Great way to get some hands-on experience.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of NLP. We'll catch you next time.